Radio Zero.
Oh,
It's
shit, did I not?
Radio
Oh.
Zero with Rick and Rose. Yes, you didn't move the microphone in front of me.
No, I thought I had you muted. We're live streaming again every other Friday, 5 p.m. Central. So far, so good. We live stream on Facebook on the Radio Zero page and on the Poster Children page, on Twitch at PCJC USA, and on the Poster Children YouTube channel. You can patronize us at patreon.com/Radio Zero. Thanks to everyone of our patron donors. My checklist is all messed up. You can subscribe to the podcast. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Go to radiozero.us. There are other links to subscribe. All right.
And let us know if we're echoing again.
Is that
probably.
a problem? Were people complaining?
No, but,
Oh.
well, a while ago, people like there was a couple of episodes ago where we were echoing and stuff. So I thought I'd tell people to let us know if we were echoing, because this is, So what are we going to talk about, Rick?
I don't know, whatever you want to.
So a good friend of ours just passed away. So I thought we could talk about Steve Albini.
All right.
Are you prepared to do that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, good. Tina Nixon is saying it sounds good here. So without warning, so it was, what was it? What day was it? Wednesday?
I'm not sure. It was yeah.
A student of mine, a former student of mine, texted me. That's how I found out. Chris Rieger texted me and said something like, "Rose, did you hear about Steve Albini? Oh, I'm so sorry," or something. And it was one of those, I looked at the phone and I went, "No," and I put the phone away. And I'm like, I think probably for some people they were like, no, that's going to be one of those stupid rumors. And I put my phone away, and I was supposed to drive. I was driving to Tuscola, Tuscola. I was driving an hour and a half from there. I think it was Wednesday because you had a final that day. So I think I'm walking to the car and I'm thinking the phone is in my pocket and I'm not going to look at my phone now forever for the rest of my life. I'm not going to look at my phone because I don't want to know if it's true or not. And then I thought, well, what if Rick texts me and needs me? I better tell him that I'm not looking at my phone. So I pulled out my phone again and I texted you and I said, Rick, I'm not looking at my phone. And then I put it away. Did you get that message?
Yeah, but why would... Yeah, I didn't know what that meant. So.
Yeah, it just meant I wasn't going to look at my phone. So, and then I couldn't help it at some point while I was on the road with the self-driving car. I finally went online and found out that it was the truth. Or I think I texted you and said, "Is this true?" And then what did you look up the New York? What did you do? Where were you when Steve Albini died?
Well, what's strange is if he passed away that night before, oddly, I think I was ordering tickets for the Off Shellac show in Chicago right around that time. It's really deeply disturbing to me, thinking back. It's like finding out about that show and then ordering the tickets and then hearing that he had passed away in the night. And that was... But I Pitchfork.
You went to Pitchfork?
Well, I didn't go to Pitchfork. I did a search, and that was the first thing that came up, which, in some ways, I guess is ironic, or not ironic. It's just slightly disappointing. I don't know. Not disappointing. It's just weird that, and Pitchfork maybe in some ways symbolizes what's wrong with music, maybe, or it's part of the business, but it wasn't before. That's the thing. is, if you think about Pitchfork, it started out as a blog, right? And independently started in Chicago, and then, is now what, part of Condé Nast, right? Is that right?
I think
or,
so,
or the
yeah.
other, yeah.
Yeah.
And so actually, ironically, I guess
Yeah.
it is ironic.
Sure.
I don't know if it's ironic. I have to check my Alanis
Maybe,
Morissette dictionary, but
sad.
it's yeah, but yeah, that's how I found out. Was from you, and then checking to confirm that it wasn't just a weird rumor.
Yeah.
So, well, yeah. So I don't know. I mean, talking about how we found out, I think is really inconsequential and not.
I mean, yeah, I know.
Not interesting. I mean, talking about Steve and the impact he had on our lives. I mean, I haven't listened to it completely because I found it difficult, but I went back and we actually did an interview with him on this show 20 years ago, almost exactly 20 years ago. And it was right after Johnny Ramone had died. And we talked about Johnny Ramone. He talked about Johnny Ramone and how influential he was and how influential the Ramones were. And then I stopped listening because I was you can find it in our archives. It's up on the web, but it just realizing, this is like, Steve is. I mean, I felt I was upset when Johnny Ramone died, and I felt the Ramones, were an important part of my life. But the thing is being slightly younger, the scene I was a part of, we were a part of. Steve was. I think I would say much more impactful, right, and directly, because we knew him. But just that thought of when someone important in your scene and in your life passes away, your community, right, and that, it was powerful.
It's, I mean, like, my dad passed away this year. Yeah, my dad passed away this year, but I've been preparing my whole life for that. It's like, I knew, like, and little by little he was kind of going away and stuff like that. But like this, I just keep thinking, like, this is somebody I expected to see again at some point and talk to and then like we're not going to get to talk to him anymore. That's kind of weird for me. Like.
And then I was thinking back, when was the last time I actually saw him and talked to him? And was it when he was here? When he talked? Because then I talked to...
Yeah, maybe it might have been,
When I talked to Kendra about it, the university, his visit to campus here and the university galleries, it was before COVID. So it's like, wow. So I hadn't actually had a face-to-face conversation with him for 5 years. But it was... The thing is about... music friends, I guess you would say, is that you have these really strong connections. You're on tour, you play shows with people, or you spend, an intense, couple of days. Sometimes it's just a couple of days.
Or you're
in
sitting
a studio.
in a van, in studio, right? Exactly. You're 12 hours in a studio with somebody, pouring your heart out, right?
And then you don't see them. You might not see them for a year or a decade. And then it's like you see him again, and it's just like instant connection again. And so the fact that, I mean, thinking about that, it's beyond the people that we've been in bands with, over the years. Steve's one of the, earliest sort of people, sort of music friends, I guess, that we had that 35 or 40 year history with him. And just not being able to talk to him again. It was always just amazing to see him again and spend time with him. And that's not going to happen.
Just an absolutely brilliant guy. So he recorded. Did we record with him before we recorded with Ian Burgess?
No, we recorded with Ian.
Right.
We did the Ian package, which was, the weekend at Chicago Recording Company. So we did that in the summer of '88, I believe, and
what did we record?
We
Parts
recorded,
of Flower.
we recorded 14 or 15 songs. So all like what started, Flower was just an 8-song EP, but we recorded a full record with Ian, and the Ian package was You record, you track everything the first day, Saturday, and then Sunday you mixed everything. And that's what we did. And then a year passed, we hadn't put out those recordings because it was hard to do back in the day. And then it was like Mike Potential said, hey, let's put out
Came up to us at a show, right?
Yeah, no, and I don't think it was Mike. I think it was possibly just we had new songs, new drummer, and it was like we needed to record again. And it was like just in the same way we had connected to Ian through the digits. Probably Chris Corpora, talked to Rick Digit and got Steve's phone number, and we went up and spent a day recording at Steve's house. And that was the time when he had the sort of live rooms in the basement, and then his control room was off the kitchen. It was just a little tiny closet off the kitchen, like a pantry.
So
Later he moved his control room in his house up to the attic. But this was really early on. It was even more sort of minimal setup.
So he'd have to, we'd be all ready to go, and to start playing, and then he'd have to run up the stairs, and he'd be in the control room, right?
He did a lot of running up and down, but he would just talk to us through the talkback once we were recording. But he was running up and down the stairs.
Rolski.
Yeah, and I think it was we never recorded at his house once he moved the control room up into the attic, but it must have been even crazier then. But we had seen Big Black. We had the record.
I have
the records. Wait, you've got the poster.
I've got the poster here.
Why don't you read it for the people, most of the people who will not be reading it off the screen?
I'm holding it in front of the screen now, but then it says Big Black on the front. It says at the top, it says help stamp out your community. I don't know who made this poster, but Big Black with Club Crack and the Digits, Sunday, October 19th, 7 p.m., Channing Murray Foundation, 1209 West Oregon, $5 in advance at Record Swap, $6 at the door, all ages welcome. And then there's a man sitting back. I don't know. Is this a famous person?
No.
I don't know. Okay,
I remember that poster.
Man with a pipe and a castle, like kind of dreaming of a castle.
What year do you think that was?
Well, now if I look at my book, this might be the see, now my book starts with Steve.
Yeah. So that show would have been the first time we saw the Digits. So Big Black playing, and I feel like they played Channing Murray twice.
It was 1986, my friend. October 19th, 1986.
Yeah, and so we had we had the records, seen the show. And that was the thing. That was the thing about Big Black. what was strange at the time, and so there was, a lot of you know about like the Sisters of Mercy, and maybe Red Lorry, Yellow Lorry, a really great band. There were a bunch of drum machine sort of gothy bands. So the early Sisters of Mercy records, and then this great band, Red Lorry, Yellow Lorry, and then finding this Chicago band on Homestead Records that had a drum machine also. And I remember going to Wax Trax and
record store in Chicago.
Yeah, famous. Yeah, most people I know, I would think.
Okay, yeah.
And Big Black was actually in a section with those bands. And so that's kind of I feel like how I found out about Big Black, probably also because of the Quaker at Record Swap, right? Yeah. But it was they were a weird, and it doesn't seem like it now, but in my mind they were like a weird crossover band. So you had your Husker Du and your Meat Puppets and your SST bands, and then you had these weird British bands that had drum machines that were more gothy. And then here was a band that was kind of both.
Dressed Chicago-y, right? They were like, they weren't dressed goth at all.
Yeah.
They weren't. Yeah. Can I read from my book?
Sure.
The beginning of my book. This is how my book starts. "Where's my $5?" an audience member yelled from the back of the church. "Up my ass with your wristwatch where you left it last week," drawled Mr. Steve Albini from the stage. He was taking too long to tune his guitar. A red Strat-shaped object with the words "That's the thing" on it attached to him by a thick leather strap wrapped around his waist. He'd worn his guitar in this fashion since high school. No conventional guitar strap across his chest. His thin waist supported his entire instrument, leaving his arms free. So that like I started,
Yeah.
and then I have I'm talking about how scary the show was, because so there's another, this is weird. There's like a picture, that I think one of the editors of the book had, of a different flyer.
Poster for the same
and
show.
Apparently I forgot that I had one. So,
Mm-hmm.
but it talks about how the drum machine was breaking, because it was really, he was trying to fix the drum machine at that show, and people were yelling.
Yeah, something. Yeah, was it that show? Because there was a second one. The second one had Urge Overkill opening, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, they played twice in Channing Murray. The second one, I think, was the firecracker overheating one. I don't know.
This is the same flyer, Rick. The one that's in my book. It says Channing Murray Foundation. It does say Urge Overkill in digits, but this flyer that I have only says Big Black with Club Crack in the digits. It doesn't say.
Well, that's the question. Are they're the same show?
Yeah, it's the same show.
Okay, so it was 4 bands. Because I do remember Club Crack playing too.
Yeah.
Anyways, whatever. Old people talking about shows they
Cody
saw.
B is saying Red Lorry, Yellow Lorry are great. Yes, they are.
They are.
Yeah, we agree.
And so yeah, it was very exciting for us to go up to Steve's house, and that was the thing, is that when he already had a reputation, or was kind of had this persona, but when we went up there and recorded at his house.
He was so sweet. Really, yeah. I wrote that. He was very businesslike.
I've always wondered why he didn't have a problem with us, or why he liked us. And my thought is that he did. I know there would be people who would kind of stalk him, and guys would try to, be, crass and, kind of be these characters in order to impress him, I guess, maybe, or to get an in with him, right? To
Probably.
kind of react to him as the kind of character in his songs. And I think we didn't do that. We were just and that's the thing, is we're kind of goofballs. Like, literally, I think we were goofballs. We're like these goofy kids. But
you keep using that word goofy now. Can you explain in what way we goofed? Because
I think we're just like jabbery, nerdy,
geeky. We were geeky.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why he liked it, because he's a total geek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't like we were
mathy.
And we had a woman in the band, so we weren't. Yeah, it wasn't total like super broy. And so I don't know what it was, but yeah, he was
so
great
sweet to
and
us.
always wonderful to us. And it had, and the digits. I don't know if the what's the digits record? The first he did Hornet Pinata. Steve did that, but I don't know if they had recorded that yet. But they had recorded One Dead Hippie, the Lovesicle single. And I think that might have been one of the first things Steve had recorded when he set up the studio in his house, and it sounded really crazy and blown out, which I loved.
Yeah, Rick loves the way the single sounds.
Yeah,
One Dead Hippie song.
Yeah, but then he was also he did talk about. I guess I don't know if the Pixies record had come out yet.
He was talking about.
He was definitely talking about it, because he was like, "These are the He had this cool box of microphones that he had bought. I think he had said when he was going to work on the Pixies record, and then he also talked a lot about doing a bunch of tape editing on that record. Like how they
didn't have their songs straightened out yet.
And because so we were Throwing Muses fans. I love that first Throwing Muses record.
You were a Throwing Muses fan.
Yeah. And so we were aware of the Pixies, but it was like and so I think we were chatting to him about that, and he was saying, "Oh yeah, they're okay, but they didn't have any beginnings or endings to their songs. I had to just chop them all up. Yeah. I had to kind of create the beginnings and ends to all their songs, on tape." And what was interesting is that, so those early days, he was a little more proactive. And so when we did that first recording, the stuff that's on Flower, I mean, he took, I had a Roland JC 120, instead of my super reverb, which I still have.
It's
but
like a real jangly amp, right? That's
Yeah,
like a
yeah.
jangle amp.
and
It's
and
an
and he
REM
was
amp.
like, and even though like Big Black, I think the bass amp was a Roland solid state amp, so that kind of sound. But it was like I had that amp, and then he disconnected the amp and plugged in a Fender amp into the speakers, and I recorded through that. He did a lot of tuning on Brendan's drums, and so he was pretty proactive at that time. It changed later. He became more of the documenter, the kind of, what's his name? The guy who did all the jazz records in his parents' house in New Jersey, the famous, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, the famous jazz producer, where it was like documenting the sound, right? But really early on, he was a little more involved in kind of that tone and the way the record sounded, and just helping us out with setting up our instruments and getting sounds.
Yeah, I remember the Dietz cabinet that I think I played through the Dietz cabinet, and I played through, there was I don't know what amp I had, but
you had your trainer already, I think.
I wouldn't have had a trainer until he had told me to get one. Really? I already
honestly,
had it?
Rose,
wow, okay.
I think the trainer...
That's how cool I am.
I think the trainer... I think their love of trainer came from your amp, because we bought that at record at what's it called? Guitar Center in Chicago for like $75. It was
You
like,
want that? Okay, sure.
It was like,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And
Oh,
that was
yeah.
another
That's
thing.
actually, I think you might be right now that I think about it. Yeah.
And then 30 years later, when we were doing 35 years later, so we did Daisy Chain, but he actually he said something else to me, like was when he pointed to this twin reverb head, like he had. This is like in 2016 when we were recording Grand Bargain in the studio, had a twin reverb that the speaker had been sliced off and it had been turned into just a head, but it was still a twin reverb, and then using it as that. And he said, yeah, look at that. Do you see that? And I'm like, yeah. And it's like, that's like the amp you had when you recorded Daisy Chain Reaction. It was like you had a twin reverb head that had been hacked. The speakers had been hacked off and then stuck onto with a 412 cabinet. And I have that because of you having that weird, modded twin reverb converted into a head. And I was like, geez. But he had a mind like a steel trap too. So it's I don't know. Anyways, what was going on? Yeah, so it was just and that's the thing is also we did the recording. Brendan just posted about this, our drummer, when we recorded with Steve. We took the drumsticks, the broken drumsticks, hickory drumsticks.
You went outside because we were recording in July, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And used the drumsticks to barbecue on, and then he proceeded to lecture us about the music industry.
Yeah.
And
first, okay, so the drumsticks had to be soaked in water, right? There was like a garbage can or something full of water and drumsticks, and those were going to be hickory smoked, smoking the hickory barbecue, right? There was that.
Drumsticks are hickory, but
yeah.
And
there were certain drumsticks that you couldn't use, and he also taught me about cilantro.
Yeah.
I was like, "What's this green stuff?" And then he was like, "I have a list of things that he taught me about."
Kosher Coke.
Look at that.
That was
Kosher Coke. Was that?
He also said, "Gosh, was that all?" We recorded a couple of times at his house.
Yeah.
And so he talked about white pepper. Also, he didn't like black pepper. I remember that. That may have been later. But anyways, he had a whole thing about the music industry and what's wrong with it, and be careful. And this was before it must have been it would have been right after like Husker Du had signed to a major, but this was long before Sonic Youth and everything like that.
Before the problem with problem with music, because he writes about us in that.
Yeah, but the problem that essay, right, comes from not just him talking to us. It was just kind of generally in the air, and he was talking about that, and he was already, I think seeing what was going to happen. I think he knew he didn't know the Nirvana thing was going to happen, but he was seeing, and you already knew about it. You knew with, Husker Du signing to a major, and then probably was that maybe around Soundgarden No, I think that was even before Soundgarden. It was just like the things were starting to change, and he was already like forming a lot of that sort of argument or analysis of the music industry.
So I have the list of things that we learned, or I have amazing things I've learned from Steve Albini in order of importance, and that it says, like, the first one is it doesn't matter what your recording contract states. You may have complete control, but if your label refuses to honor it, then you have to hire a lawyer in New York or LA to sue them, and you can't. That's expensive. And then you'll be shelved. You can't go on tour while that's happening. You can't release a record while that's happening. And then the two is the thing about him being an engineer. He doesn't change your sound. He documents it. He doesn't want to be called a producer. Number 3, the money that the record label is paying you will always come out of the money that you make from the records. That means if you get tour support from a bus, or somebody, or if anybody gets paid, it's coming from your money, not, and it's recoupable from your records.
Your
sales,
future royalties.
Your future royalties. Any producer who takes percentage points off of an album is no longer a neutral party in the documentation of a band, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're taking points and the band wants to play, let's say like a C# chord instead of a B chord or something like that, and and Mercy Rule talked about this too, like you hear, oh no, we're just going to make more money if you do it this way, and so you're going to force the band to do that way, if you're getting a percentage of their sales. So he didn't do that. For your band photographs or your band videos, your record label may choose people they enjoy working with and use your money to hire these people. There may be nothing special about these people. They're just, quote, friends of the label who also would like some of your money. And since it's not really the label's money, they have nothing to lose by just giving it away. So, and then in this way, the label is able to forge relationships with people for free.
And, Thurston Moore wrote, a nice thing about Steve, but he talked a little bit about this too, though, the whole major label thing and versus indie label, and the problem is that Thurston Moore made the point of like with the indie label, sometimes you would find out that there was no label anymore, or your record wouldn't come out, which is what happened to us, right? And financial problems, no ability to promote. Or just an inability to press records, right? And so the thing is that there was a lot more kind of gray area, but everything Steve said was true.
True, yeah.
Although a lot of our experience was, and this was because we weren't massively successful, right? Is our problem in the major label world was not with interference, it was indifference. And so nobody talks about that. So the thing is that major label world was, you sign 100 bands and 99 of them, go nowhere, and you're betting on the one, to go everywhere. And so those other 99 that are on the label are, competing for resources, competing for attention, competing for
competing for radio spots, where you're only going to get, anyway.
And so us, personally, we did not have interference, but we were also walking into it, and
we
there
knew.
was a perception of us at the label that we can't tell them what to do, right? They're going to be. We
can't tell poster children. They're smart.
But that's because Steve
taught us. He taught us everything we knew.
Us, and we had that context and that information.
I got here, stuffed animals may be blown up by creating a small hole in the middle with a knife and inserting firecrackers. Having a container full of old stuffed animals can yield an afternoon of entertainment at a July 4th barbecue. Then, mentioned about cilantro. And then the drumsticks that you use cannot be the shiny ones. And then having good, expensive microphones is the key to recording. Right? And then,
having good microphones, and getting capturing the best possible sound as opposed to trying to repair the sound in the mix, right? So it's about Yeah, and so
having the best instruments and then I've got like just the thing about the quadratic diffuser in the ceiling behind the sound engineer position, and then some other stuff.
And then, I'm thinking about, so what was really interesting is, so when we were going to do our second record with, we did demos at Steve's house. That was the thing, is we did demos. And then...
Which second record? Not Daisy
Chain
Reaction.
Reaction.
Oh, Daisy Chain.
We did demos at Steve's house. And then with the idea that, okay, and then we'll do the full recording with Butch Vig. We wanted to record with Butch Vig. And then sent the demos to Butch, and he said, this sounds good already. You should just record with Steve.
And we wanted to record with Butch Vig because he had recorded...
Well, Mike Potential. So Mike Potential was the person who, because of Killdozer.
Yeah.
But then also Mike Potential loved Dick Kreutzen. And so, anything about like the Smashing Pumpkins recording with Butch Vig, it's because Mike Potential was like he would say to everybody, every band he was involved with. So, Mike Potential put out our first EP, whatever,
and
Flower
Smashing
Flower,
Pumpkins
and then
first
put out
too, yeah.
later put out Smashing Pumpkins' first single. Mike was just constantly like, Butch Vig, Butch Vig, Butch Vig, listen to this Dick Kreutzen record, and it's like, oh yeah, I've heard the Killdozer record. Steve was very gracious, it was like, because I remember saying to him, oh yeah, we're going to try to record with Butch, and he's like, oh, okay. And then we came back and said, can you record the record instead? And I think the one testament to his skills and the recording is that version of If You See K that's on the album is the one we recorded at his house. So that's not the one that we recorded, full studio. So I think there's another version of If You See K floating around that was recorded at Chicago Recording Company, but it was, And Steve, was like, okay, well, we'll do some more reverb stuff, I remember that too. He was like, oh, Butch's stuff sounds a little more reverby. Maybe we'll do some more of that. And so he put up some more room mics. I mean, obviously he was all into room mics, but he was adding more room, I think, on some of the stuff because of that. That would have been, And then we recorded some stuff with him, and then we didn't record with him for years. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Did we record anything like over the like one-offs or anything with him?
We did. We did like 4 gags. Yeah. It was called. That was a session at his house. So there was a Monkees cover, a Thin White Rope cover.
Did you do the Bob Dylan? We did the Bob Dylan
cover.
Song.
We did 4 covers.
Yeah.
In a session with him. That's and I
ISIS.
still have the tape. He says he wrote 4 gags because he was a little not dismissive, but it was like, oh, okay, these aren't real songs. You're doing a cover.
They're covers,
a bunch of covers.
Yeah,
but they were
gags.
all for compilations.
Yeah.
They were going Monkees. Did I say Monkees? So
yes.
It was Monkees, Thin White Rope. What was it?
Bob Dylan.
Bob
ISIS.
Dylan.
Yeah.
And one more. Wow, what was the 4th one? I can't remember.
I don't know. I only liked ISIS. You're the way, and I remember I wanted to play. There was like a more complicated bass part for ISIS, or for one of the songs. I think it was for ISIS, and then he was just like, no, you're not going to play that. Don't play that. Like, you have to dumb it. And I was like, no, I want to show off. I'm good at bass for a girl or something like that. And I just, and then we ended up playing it so fast that I couldn't play it. I couldn't play the extra complicated notes anyway. But I remember him trying to convince me not to, that basic is better. Heidi Orr says Providence was recorded at Steve's house, but he was on tour at the time. And
wow.
It would be cool to collect those for an EP. Isis Rocks, Joshua Vaughn says. Yeah. I'm trying to think of more remembering. I was new to recording at the time. You know, I didn't really like it that much, but I mean, he made it.
But you like it now.
No. Oh, yeah, I hate it now. But he made it like palatable for me. I think I probably wrote that in the book too. Like, it's just interesting to record with him because he had always had so much to say about stuff, you know?
And that's my memory, you know. And so the thing is like there are certain things that happened when we were doing Daisy Chain Reaction, in the big studio in Chicago Recording Company. I remember falling asleep, and so the studio had gotten an Akai sampler, one of those rack mount samplers. Oh, our kid is playing drums in the basement now.
I can go tell him.
No, that's fine.
Right.
I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Bob had missed a snare hit.
That's right. I remember this.
In what song? I think it's like one of the songs on the Sub Pop single.
Was it Pointed Stick or
Pointed
something?
Stick. He missed a snare hit, and then it was like Bob and Steve sat there for like an hour figuring out how to get the sampler working and how to sample his snare drum and fly it in, right? And so you would think, oh, Steve Albini never used a sampler, right? Would never do that kind of thing. But it was a new gadget, right? That was in the studio, and it was like, you know, instead of Bob going out there and overdubbing his snare, you know, it was like, oh, okay, let's do this.
Geek out on this thing.
I was just like, oh my God.
Then we have the story about Aerosmith, right?
Right.
May as well recount that again. Like, we were so excited. Well, Steve was very excited too because Aerosmith was coming in to do a radio interview in Chicago Recording Company.
What was it called? Not Rock Over London. One of those call-in shows. Yeah, one of those radio they used to have where they'd interview a band. And so Aerosmith was in town, and they went into, you know, like Chicago Recording Company had like 8 studios or something, and so they went into one of the upstairs studios, like the voiceover studios, and they were doing an interview. And
he was doing everything he could possibly do to try to patch in the phone into our studio, so we could.
So they had the old school, you know, eight line telephone system, right? And they were taking calls through that for this live thing. And Steve's like messing around, I think trying to crank call, right? He's trying to get it on the air and crank call. And then all of a sudden a guy walks into the studio while we're sitting there.
Wearing all black, like a roadie or something, like a tech guy walks in with tape.
Some assistant engineer from the studios, right? Yeah. And takes a piece of marking tape. What do you call that? Yeah, the kind of tape you use.
Electrical tape?
No, it's the kind of tape you use to mark your, you know.
Just puts like a cross over.
Just tapes across the whole phone system, you know, and puts a piece of tape across it.
You're not allowed to use it.
Please do not use the phone.
And then Bob went out to the bathroom or something like that, came back, and he came back very excitedly because he had run into, who did he run into? Because I don't know the guy's name.
The Brad guy, the other guitarist in Aerosmith.
And he told me a joke, or he was going to go looking for him.
So Bob's joke at the time, so Bob always had jokes. It was like, what's
brown and sounds like a bell? Yeah. Dung, dung. That's what he was singing it to. Dung, dung. So he went looking for them to tell him a joke. That's right.
Yeah, and he
ran into him.
Bradley, what's his name, from Aerosmith, and told him the joke. And then
he said, I got a joke for you. How do you get a nun pregnant? And Bob said, how? And he said, fuck her.
Ha, ha, ha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was hysterical.
So
I think Steve liked that joke, right?
Yeah, I think he references it.
Yeah.
In something, right?
Yeah.
He had also, I think he had just done the Slint record, the first one, right? So Steve did not do, Steve did Tweez. Steve did not do,
Brad Whitford, sorry.
Yeah.
We've actually got people listening. There are like a lot of people listening to this.
Yeah. But Steve had just done the first Slint record, and he was talking about this nature documentary, right? And so that's some of the sounds in the record
Oh yeah, we otter. No, what is it? What kind of? Oh man, we're
Not a
like old.
meerkat.
Like
Yeah,
no,
what is
no,
it?
no. Yeah, we have noises. Lemur noises.
Yeah, lemur
noises. 'Cause
Which
there
I
was
think he said. Did
animal
he say he
document.
also snuck it into the Slint record,
Oh,
into
that's cool.
Tweez? Yeah,
Yeah.
he was obsessed with that kind of stuff.
Okay, David Byczowski says Brad Whitford. Joshua Vaughn says that we can't hear Dow drumming on the mics.
Yeah, no.
And David Byczowski says Spiderland was Brian Paulson.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so people, falsely attribute that to Steve, but it's, but I believe Steve recommended Brian Paulson for that record.
In fact, we got our drummers we got Johnny Machine from Steve. I called
Yeah.
him up and said, hey, do you know who? And Bob, too, I think, right? Did we get Bob from him? No?
No. Bob came from his friend, Bob's friend.
Oh, Tony? Or no, I
No.
don't remember who it was.
I don't, no. Yeah, that was another one
But
of Bob's friends.
we called up.
Was, I think, tried out also.
Yeah.
And then Bob found out.
So he's just I just loved hanging out with him. He's just I loved. You could ask him a math question or just anything, and then he would just go into great detail. And I have a video of him like talking about the quadratic diffuser, like.
And also remembering that he had that first time we recorded with him. Big Black was over, but I don't think Rape Man had started. Had it? He was talking about how I remember him telling you. Or talking about how he still had his guitar picks in his coin purse or whatever, or his pocket, even though he hadn't been in a band for a year or two.
And I have a shellac shirt. I've got somewhere. It's a black on black shellac shirt, but
And
that was from later.
Yeah. And there's the Friend record. We've got copies of that. The Shellac Friends record. And so we saw, and so that's the other thing is, so Bob Weston, we knew. Actually, I feel like we knew Bob. No, we would have met Bob on that first tour out east. We met Bob
they
when
they played
when
in Champaign.
Volcano Sons played. Yeah. Right, so we would have met Bob first, and so we always had that connection with Bob too.
Yeah.
And so seeing Shellac playing in Champaign, and so we'd always see them, and then.
I think we may have played with them in New York, I don't know.
Did we play with Shellac ever? I don't think we.
Oh, maybe
did.
we never played with Shellac. No. Yeah, we just saw them. Josh Vaughn is asking, did we ever play poker with Steve? No, we're not at that level.
No, or pool or any of that kind of stuff. Yeah, we weren't that kind of band. Weren't those kind of musicians the ones that hung out and played pool and.
Well, we didn't live in Chicago either, right?
So we were the goofy Central Illinois cousins, who would show up once a year.
Country bumpkin cousins.
The country cousins.
But we did, so, and then I have, I'm glad I left this in the book too. Like we played that, what did we play? All Tomorrow's Impeachments?
Yeah.
And so we spent some time with him there, but he had the broken collarbone.
He'd,
right?
Yeah, been doored and had been rolled over by a car. And so, that's the thing, too, is like, I'm trying to remember who I was talking to, said he seemed, especially him, he seemed, indestructible in a way, or just, that kind of persona, right? and I was like, he survived that whole bike accident thing and seemed, fine, once, because... Yeah, he was recovering.
Riding his bike everywhere, right?
Yeah,
Did we drive him home?
We had to. I think we drove him home that one time when it was rainy or something. Oh, no, he wasn't riding his bike yet because he was... Yeah, he was recovering. Yeah, I think that was when we were doing the first half of Grand Bargain, and the second half was a year later, so I think he was recovered by then. But yeah. And so that was the thing, is he seemed somewhat indestructible, although, I mean... he did have some problems, I remember. So that would have been right around the time that we did the first recording. He had some kind of heart issues. Yeah. Which I had forgotten about. Chris had reminded me of that.
Yeah, no, I remember that.
Yeah, and he was like, And I'm just, what was he was, it was kind of like a meditation thing almost. It was like a mindfulness thing. It's like, yeah, I've got to stop being so stressed out, right? Was one of the things.
You know what I was...
Some kind of incident, but it was like he just needed to, he was kind of going through, it seemed he seemed reflective. He seemed reflective about his already, and that was what, years, 30, 35 years ago, where he was already kind of thinking about that angsty kind of
but
character.
I like when we would record with him, I don't remember which of our drummers smoked, but we were recording and I remember somebody saying, "Do you mind if I smoke?" And he was, "No, go ahead." And he even like had cigarettes you could smoke or something like that.
Really?
And I remember that just because I hated anybody smoking in the room with me, but he was like, "Go ahead," but he never smoked like in front of us, like at least.
Boy, I don't remember that, but yeah, we had a lot of I would say most of our drummers smoked.
Yeah, probably smoking drummers.
It was just the thing. In a total tangent, just watching the early episodes of Miami Vice is how much smoking's going on. Don Johnson's smoking all the time. It was amazing. Things have changed, people.
Yeah. I can't say enough good things, like how, like, just gentle and nice and kind and like just so like driven to, like for good, Like that's what it seemed like to me. And I remember having an argument with one like an old bandmate of ours. I get that kind of outs that person, but just like he must be a terrible person. Listen to his lyrics and just going no. I can just hearing them. I know that he doesn't like these people. He's singing with a different voice. He's saying bad. Like he doesn't. No, he's not for this. It never ever upset me that he had a band called Rape Man. I don't know why, and it's because I'm Gen X, I guess, and I know that he's apologized. He said, he's sad that he had that band name. And that it was named after a Japanese comic, which I know exactly how his mind worked for naming a band like that. Like, oh, it's totally accepted in another part of the world, and probably and horrible. You know what I mean? And a horrible thing, but he would name his band that
we've
way.
Talked about that. It's kind of the voice of the monster, and that it doesn't translate well into the 21st century, right?
Yeah.
And even talking, I mean, that's the thing is, I don't even want to go into this political thing, but it's like what happened with the fucking Nazis, right? It was like you knew if somebody was like saying something about Nazis or they were making fun of them or something, and then it was like the idea was like it was so obvious that this was a negative cultural thing that you were kind of expressing the negativity or kind of parodying. I don't even know if it's parodying. I don't know what it is, but it was like something that creative people did in the 80s, right? It was like kind of the voice of the monster. It was a way of kind of providing critique, but wow, and the realization, and that's what Steve said, is like a position of privilege. That was like a resounding thing he said, and also it was like, oh, those people would never come back after me. So it's like even if you kind of embody or parody those awful people, it's like you're doing that from a safe space, and so that really kind of sunk in with me. But regardless, yeah, it's definitely a cultural change, but also I think a heartfelt change and an understanding that, yeah. Anyways, one other thing I remembered though is that this is before the internet. So I had been doing home recording, right? 4-track recording. And then what would it have been? It would have been was it after Daisy Chain? Maybe it's even later. It might have been after Tool of the Man building our home studio, right? And building a home studio, Steve, he was my resource for that. And so getting recommendations for equipments, microphones, and all of that. And so it's like nowadays you can just go and it's like, oh, what's a good starting kit for somebody who's going to start recording drums and everything like that. Whereas that information, you could maybe find a book that would say that, but it was like talking to Steve, it was like, oh no, yeah, you should get Sennheiser 421s. Well, SM57, he never liked the SM57, but it was like, you probably already have one of those, It's like everybody has those. And then, he just gave me a list, SM81s for overheads. It's like that. There's my core mic kit that I've had for the past 35 years. It was that list of gear that he gave me, and that was the kind of thing he did. Yeah.
What about CVA 17?
Yeah, even
oh my God!
just
at Illinois State University, our new we got a room, and we requested money to fix it up into a recording studio. Go ahead.
Well, it's just a space that can kind of be a teaching space, and then also serve as a recording space, like a single room.
This is just a few years ago. We asked him for help,
and it was like it got super complicated. It was like, we need to hire acousticians and everything like that.
The university was telling,
it got really complicated. And then you emailed Steve, I think.
Yeah.
And then he was like, oh, here, he drew a diagram, gave some recommendations. It was like, oh, this would be a good, way to kind of set up that kind of space, as a classroom recording space.
Like it's all hand drawn, and there's all kinds of notes all over it, just for us, for a university, I mean.
Yeah, and came down, to talk to our students and give a lecture at the galleries.
Do you know what I found? He insisted that he wasn't going to drive his car down here. He insisted that he needed to take the train. And the first time that he was supposed to come down, for some reason, I think the train was canceled or something. This was before.
I was talking about this with Kendra. There's video of it. The water main broke right in Union Station, and there was a flooding.
And he took a video of it and sent it to us.
Yeah.
I found the video the other day, and I was just like, "What? Oh man, I don't even know how to explain this." But he finally did make it down here, but he insisted that he was going to take the train. Didn't want to drive. And I figure it was for the environment, right? To be responsible.
Yeah, and it's just public transportation, right? And public transit, and it's like it's the ridiculousness of our car-centric world.
Yeah. Yeah. So like a role model. He's like a role model.
Yeah. And then also the fact that he kind of held firm in those ideals, right? And so, the indie rock ideals that were formed in all of us in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
And he really, 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 really stuck with it. And I always talk about him and Ian Mackay as being, they're very privileged. They're privileged in a way, right? It's like they're the two people, in that scene who are able to do, kind of just stick to their, guns and say, this is
stick to their ethics. Yeah.
And it's like,
and then tell the rest of us, you need to do that too. Could you name his teaching space after Steve? Joe is saying that.
Oh, yeah.
And then Cody B says, I love in the video you posted trying to get the harmonic right. And he goes, I guess. Yeah, I've got another video of recording with Steve too. It's you recording vocals. I'll have to find that. But anyway, yeah.
And I do feel bad. I mean, I think he felt bad when I freaked out in those recording sessions at some point when we were mixing the record. Is like I have a real problem with my vocals and singing, and I kind of it was obvious that I was upset, and I think he really, really, I think
he was up. He
I think
felt
I
sad.
upset him.
Yeah, I think
I upset him. Because he felt like he had failed. Yeah, and it was not that he had failed.
Yeah, I talked to him about it.
Yeah, and you talked to him about it, but it was like that to me is a sad moment. Thinking about that is because he was so great.
He was just like sweetheart. And can I read what Heather wrote?
Sure.
Because all I've been thinking about is Heather, like the minute, like, so I wrote about this in my book too, like the letters to Santa thing, and you need to look this up if you don't know what this is. Heather, I guess, I think found some letters to Santa. You have to look it up. I don't remember what some Chicago person wrote about it, so you can find it. But they started reading these letters to Santa, and they realized that the letters from these kids were just asking for basic things. So they got together a charity, every year, and they go and they give gifts. They like fulfill the letters and stuff, and it's just so beautiful. And I get the feeling that Steve, we all know that he changed over the years, right? He got more mellow and stuff like that, and I assume it's because of Heather or something. I don't know. I don't know Heather at all, but I'm going to read what she wrote, because I just was thinking about her constantly after, when I heard this. So she wrote, "If I prayed, I would pray for you that someone loves you the way Steve Albini loves the people with whom he loves, all the animals, the work, the words, the purpose, the dream. All of it is meant to be loved." And I totally get that from having hung out with him. "And if there is a power imbalance, then it is worth fighting for. But don't go into a fight unprepared, because Steve will wipe the floor with you. A master wordsmith, an impressive orator, only ever trying to impress himself with the dance. He was more like the greatest of all time than he was the curmudgeon he was often mistaken for by those who refused to admit that their underlying behavior was steadied by greed." And that's the thing too. Like, people say, "Oh, he was a curmudgeon," and I never got that from him. Like, everything seemed, if he was angry about something, he had a reason, Here, I'm going to continue with Heather's writing. "You see, you are not excused, no matter who you are. Power and privilege, which he had a much greater understanding of in the last 10 years, thanks to," and then she thanks some people that I don't know. "Power and privilege is insidious and thrives unless you take it upon yourself to recognize your own misdeeds and apologize for them as publicly as you did make them." So I guess I know that he apologized for some things that he'd said, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But for the rest of us, he is a fucking champion and worked harder than anyone else with soft hands to make sure that the greedy were never allowed to believe their own bullshit as long as he was in earshot. Don't let anyone try to fool you now. If he called you greedy in conversation, it never ended with the two of you laughing about it. And if he told you he loved you in a conversation, it never ended up with you questioning it. Next to Muhammad Ali, he was the greatest of all time. Mm-hmm. I love the ending too. If he told you he loved you in a conversation, it never ended up with you questioning it. He's just a true guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just beautiful. And all the writing, there's writing all over the internet. My eyes are tearing up now. But there's, people are telling stories about him. Remember the story we heard about him, or that he told us, or Rick Digit told us or something, when, was it Jerry Garcia died?
Oh boy, I don't remember.
He was not a Grateful Dead fan. So somebody, right, wasn't it somebody put up flyers or something saying that if you're sad about Jerry Garcia dying,
right,
please call this number and leave a message, and it was Steve's answering machine.
I forgot about that.
I love that.
Yeah. And so, he just starts getting calls from people talking about Jerry Garcia.
Man, I'm so sad. Like the hippies like crying. That was the other thing too. Like, I felt a kinship with him in not liking hippies. and we all are hippies. We embody the hippie ethics and everything like that. But, part of the hippies we don't. Yeah.
Well, yeah, the indie rock kind of more sort of punk rock sort of original kind of punk rock ideals, I guess, not the stereotype punk rock. And so I call it indie rock because, people have a very specific idea now of what punk rock is, but that idiosyncrasy, the energy, the community, the independence, all of that, he really... Oh, and that's what I was going to say is just, him talking about... being in a place where he could get away, or he was in an exceptional place where he could live out that indie life. But then I've told people a bunch of times about this, where it was, I think it wasn't about when he was talking about the Travis Bean guitar, and then it got all convoluted where all of a sudden Keith Levine got it in his mind that Steve Albini had stolen his.
Oh yeah,
and
that I couldn't remember that. Yeah,
it was so convoluted. Where
Yeah.
like, and it's like Steve bought this guitar 10 years later, but it like got all mashed together, and Steve was like, no, and then it was like, I don't have it. I sold it the second time I went broke or whatever, and that was really sunk in with me, because I had just assumed, and he actually talked to us about it too, about when we recorded with him just a few years ago, about what happened after he recorded us, that era, and all the indie bands, and then once the Nirvana thing happened and the Bush thing happened, is like everything dried up. It was like a ghost town for a while. It was like everybody assumed that, he would only do these big projects and then wouldn't do these small bands, or the small bands didn't want to record with him because he was, a big superstar producer, misrepresented by that. And so him talking about that and being, forward about it, and that was part of it, right, is to be honest about this business and this life. And when he said, also the first time we saw him after Electrical Audio opened was that at the Breeder show, where he was like, I haven't left the building for 40 days. This is the first day I've left the building.
He's worked so hard. His work ethic.
Because, the prices and the building and the business and keeping it all running, it was.
The studio only almost went under, right? At some point.
It sounded like it. Like he's and for him to say that and talk about that to me was great, because it was like, okay, because that's also, we've talked about this a lot, is the fantasy of a musician's life, or and not even successful. It's like, it's like, you were on a major label. You must have, had, tour bus and lots of money and everything. It's like, no. And it's like all these fantasies kind of about the music industry that he was always sort of countering, talking about, exposing.
Yeah.
But then also, the reality of, sort of this life where it was like Steve's, was living his ideals, but it was not simple or easy. There was struggle involved.
I have some other. I have like an index in my book with where I mention people, and I think the Steve Albini numbers, like the pages that he's on, like are like I have a ton of writing about him. So here, like at the end of the book, I was writing that I finally had the privilege of bringing my two great mentors to speak to my own students at Illinois State University. So at University Galleries, Steve Albini elevated the concept of, quote, hobby. It's not something to be ashamed of just because you can't make money at it. On the contrary, quote, hobby is what gives your life meaning. You do whatever menial job it takes in order to be able to support your art making. That's what Steve told my class, And I always say that over and over again, because I don't know how many of the music business students are going to get, jobs in the music industry, and their passion is music, and that's okay. That's what he was saying, is that that's your hobby. That's not your hobby. And it's like goes with my dad's day gig. My dad's joke, he had day gig on his license plate because a day gig was something, if you weren't a good musician, you needed a day job, so it was like an insult. But here's Steve is saying that, no, hobby, you're just a musician, you don't make money, you don't make a living at it. That's not something to be ashamed of.
But your father's license plate also was like, this is just my day gig, right? It's like, or this is
but it was part of a joke too.
Yeah, I understand, but it was also that idea that, this is not my whole life, right? This is just my day gig, right? And that's something that you have as a musician or as a creator, or a creative life, is a lot of times you're, doing something else. And that's what he was doing. He was engineering, right? Running a studio. And he was still an active musician. It was all happening in slow motion, because that's what happens as you get older, is that, you've got all of your life and your, the work you're doing to support your creative life. And then you have less and less time. So 10 years between records, but he was still actively writing music. And that was also somewhat bittersweet. Was it yesterday? Thursday. Yeah, yesterday, getting the email. Your record has shipped. Which so I had pre-ordered the new Shellac record. And it's exciting. It's like, oh, they've got a new record out, right? It's been 10 years, I think, right? And it's like, oh, great. And then pre-ordered, and then yeah, it's on the level of like David Bowie, when David Bowie's last record came out, the day he died?
Yeah.
Or he died the week before. Like the record came out so close, and it's so. But the thing about the David Bowie record is David Bowie knew, like he knew what was happening.
Yeah.
And my thought is that Steve did not know, and so that's in some ways good, but also
there's
sad, because it's like, why would it be now? Yeah, it could have had another 20 or 30 years in him.
And so, hug your loved ones and stuff like that. I've got some things here. Stephen William is thanking us for this. So I'm glad. I mean, it's hard because I know there's so much. I just, it was such a warm individual to be around, and such a wealth of knowledge and stuff like that. So, and Dannon says, thank you for uploading those videos. Somebody named Doug Abiel says, holy heck, I miss Poster Children. There's so many great shows in Northern Cal when I saw in the mid 90s. New music coming out. There's a Salaryman record that's in the can, right?
But new music from 2018.
Yeah, there's new music. That's
the
right.
record we did with Steve.
Yeah. The record that we just recorded with Steve Albini
we recorded 6 or 7 years ago.
But it seems like just yesterday, though. Lots of screaming with Rick, and I'd say the lyrics are pretty relevant. We may even have another President Trump there, so we can the video for Grand Bargain has a miniature President Trump in there. Josh Vaughn says the Grateful Dead had a song in the 1980s called Keep Your Day Job, and the fans hated it so much that they stopped playing it. He says, Josh Vaughn also says it's not work if you love your job, but most of us can't pay the bills doing what we love. It is work if you love your job too, but it's you want to spend your life being able to do what you love, and that doesn't necessarily mean that's not necessarily how you're going to make money. That's okay.
Well, and that was the thing about that time in the indie rock world. I mean, I would say for everybody at that time, playing and playing music and that kind of music at that time. So I'm talking, 80s. Before Nirvana, it was like you're not going to make a living at this. It's like you're gonna play music on your weekends, on your vacation time, and that's what we were doing.
Yeah, you're gonna save up your money and then go on tour, and then go back, drive back from Minneapolis, and straight to work.
And thanks to our conversations with Steve, and just kind of our also desire for knowledge, right? Is that when that world changed, and there was money, and there was support, and there was a short period of time where it seemed like, oh yeah, these college rock goofballs, could be commercially viable, right?
It was all because
we knew, all thanks to him. We looked at it long term, which was, what's after this, right? So we looked at Husker Du, right? We looked at we looked at the Stooges, right, or the MC5. You could go back in time, and it's like, oh yeah, there's a whole history of this. And Lou Reed, you would look back and you go, okay, there's this
it's
separate world, and to think about it not as a career, but think of it as part of your life, right? And you may be doing work to support it, and be grateful if you have the luxury. But that's the thing. It's like people don't realize. I mean, people think, oh, Steve, you get to be an audio engineer, you get to make records and everything like that. Yeah, it's great. I've done it. It's
a struggle.
It can be great.
It can be great,
but it can also be it's
painstaking, because it's not perfect, and it's going to be set in vinyl forever or stone forever and stuff like that. I know.
Yeah, and it can be exhausting. It can be exhausting.
All right,
spend like just talking about that. The first month or two that he was running the studio, he was there 24/7, right? And so that idea that and so he was a musician, right? But he had a day job, and it's a dream job for a lot of people, but unless you've actually done that job,
well, he did it.
He did it at a peak level, but it's not. It's very easy to idealize that, and I've said this before. It's like, I had a dream job, and it's like that's because people are always like, and it's like even like having the privilege of being able to be a full-time musician. It's not.
Well, it was awesome.
It was awesome,
right,
but it was also,
it was hard.
A lot of sacrifice and a lot of
Cody
shit.
Cody B here says John Solomon, who he tagged from WPRB, told the Garcia story the other day, and he's laughing about this. Hank Donovan from Rattlesnake Cables. I needed this. Thank you. Hank, you posted a beautiful picture of you with Steve. I love that picture.
And also the fact that, so Hank's company, right, and him being indebted to Steve.
Yeah. Dannon says January 8th was both Bowie's birthday and the Black Star release. Sorry, Doug Abeel is clapping for us and sent some stars. I've never been sent stars before. That's kind of cool. I hope that, I don't know what that does, but thank you. All right, go on with the Hank. Hank's,
oh yeah, no.
Yeah, it's all part of the community.
Beautiful post about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, realizing community, right? And that's, so important, and how important Steve was as part of that community.
So Doug Abeel says Jason Narducci's post on Facebook and Instagram of food allowed in Steve's studio is the best tribute video I've ever seen. Rest in power to the musical legend, or rest in RIP. I do want to say something about community. That's where it's at. And so that touch and go, what anniversary was it? The
25th anniversary.
I think I wrote about this too. But just standing there, like watching the digits and just being with all the people. It was very, very powerful. I played the song Kerosene for our kid too. Like yesterday, I was like, "You have to hear this song," and then I'm like listening to it. I'm like, "Oh, I don't know if he's gonna." He likes Slint. He's listening to a Slint song and stuff like that. But it's very hard to explain. It's very hard. Like it's a different mindset now, right? So our community are people that we grew up with listening to and grew up like in our 20s and 30s and 40s listening to the Digits and just all these bands. Jesus Lizard, what other bands you want to mention here? The Digits. Yeah. I love the Digits.
Naked Ray Gun.
Yeah, Naked Ray. I found a kid-sized Naked Ray Gun shirt upstairs. What other Chicago bands?
I don't know.
Tar, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you tired of talking?
Yeah, I think we're done.
Yeah, we should probably stop. Thanks for visiting with us, everybody. I feel such a great loss, and it wasn't like I was going to see him tomorrow or anything like that, but I feel like my world is shaken.
We would have seen him in July.
Yeah.
At that shellac show.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what saddens me. It was like, it would have been great to see the band, see all of them, and then see Steve, get to talk to Steve.
So he just touched many people's lives. I'm not even feeling, sorry for me and you either. I feel sorry for all the people that, that are experiencing loss.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough. I mean, it's, yeah. And the thing is, so, I mean, they're important, they're people who have an important impact on your creative life, right? But we knew him directly, and he had a direct impact. And I can trace so many aspects of my life, right? If not to him being an origin for it, at least being a part of it, right? And informing it. And yeah, just being able to, yeah.
John Houston. Rick,
Yeah.
you encouraged my band to record with Steve a couple of years back. I'm so glad you did.
Oh,
Cody's saying great show to get today, and John is saying thanks for having this conversation. I mean, it really means a lot to hear. Joe Chrisman says what Steve gave you, you give us. So
that's nice.
That's nice. But yeah, he was the originator. And I think there's something going on thanks, Tina. Tina says, thanks for sharing this. I think there's something going on Saturday. I don't know what it is. Like somebody's playing. Oh, Deep Tunnel Project is playing, right? So it's going to be, I wish I lived in Chicago. Yeah. Hug your loved ones and be thankful that you knew this person and that he changed your life. You know, I'm just so thankful. I'm so thankful for everything he gave us. I'm so thankful for the person that he was and how he shaped my world and how he shaped our world. I'm so thankful for that.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks for listening.